Hello and welcome to the Spikenard Culture Leadership Podcast. I am your host, Steve, and welcome to the year 2022. I am super stoked to be with you guys. And this year is the year of Renaissance creativity. What does that mean? Honestly, you're on a journey to find out with me because in January, Feb of this year, I was having a creative meetup in Bujumbura, and as I was just preparing for the meetup with different creatives in the city, this phrase, I believe from the Lord, Renaissance creativity popped up in my mind. And I just went on this rampage of just studying what the Renaissance is. And from, just like looking at different things, listening to podcasts, I just became obsessed with this idea of what would it look like to have Renaissance creativity, because it was like those two words together, Renaissance creativity. So Renaissance describing the kind of creativity that we come up with or releasing that into spaces and rooms that I walk into. And that is something that I've been pursuing, that I want to see. And what does that look like? So for me, one of the things that was really impressed on me was just the idea of, during the Renaissance, it was like a time period that was very similar to what we're going through right now. So what I'm talking about is the Renaissance came, 14th, 15th, 16th century. And before that, of course, it was the Dark Ages, and there was like war. And it's almost like there was like all kinds of like wars and plagues and stuff like that, and exactly kind of what's happening in 2022 right now, just kind of coming from 2020 to 2021, 2022, with like COVID pandemic, looking at plagues, looking at war with Ukraine and Russia, and looking at everything that's happening. So that really caught my attention. And then I looked at, what it meant. Of course, it meant rebirth. And what they say, it was like this period, it was like an increase in ideas, knowledge, and creativity. And it was like a place and a time when people, I think, they just opened their mind. And so a lot of things changed in society. And one of the key things that changed this thing, like at least people say the biggest invention during that time was, of course, the printing press. Imagine like things like paper, things like the printing press. There's of course other inventions during this time, like, the pendulum, which affected, of course, or impacted how we tell time today. Things like eyeglasses, things like the telescope, the microscope, the barometer. If you don't know what that is just like, it measures air pressure, which helps us, pretty much tell the forecast and the weather. Things like gunpowder and musket, of course, with war and everything. So there was like so much that happened during this time as far as like culture. And then, of course, art and music and architecture and all these things were really impacted, and I love what I read about this, because he talked about the idea where people became obsessed with beauty. People became obsessed with, just like stepping out of the bounds of what was. And I remember listening to this podcast, and he was talking about how during this time the church, a lot of like the art, a lot of like the writing, well, technically most of the art or expression was very, I would say, religious. And during this time, it's almost like people, they say humanist philosophy kind of came from this period where people kind of stepped out of that, where they were like drawing nature, painting and doing things that were outside of just like painting churches or things that were, religious. And then of course the Catholic Church, the Reformation and all those things, happening at the same period. Um, and I think about, during this time when we're looking at the discovery of the Americas, because this is like a huge thing, because at that time, at least per these podcasts I listened to, you know the Bible really dictated a lot of, how people thought. And when you have something that's discovered that has never, been read about in the scriptures, people are like panicking. They're like, wait, there's a continent we don't know about. There's the Americas are a continent that we haven't, heard from the scriptures, like, cause like, Africa is in there, Asia is in there, Europe is in there. So it was like this time of discovery and adventures, and people just like stepping out. And I'm just thinking, how does this affect us today? How does this affect you? How does it affect me? And what do I think? At least for me, where do I go with this idea? Like, how do I create mindset of Renaissance creativity? I think, three things, because when I read about it, it talks about the increase in ideas. And at Spikenard, we really want to be a space where we encourage ideation, conceptual, concept development, like where people can come together, connect. When you connect with other people, you get new ideas. When you connect to different cultures, you get new ideas, right? And so that for me is very important, that we would be a people that we would pursue, ideation, like in an increase in ideation, creative ideation, where we take problems and just get several ideas of how can we, like come about this. And then knowledge. I just think about the printing press being like one of the key things that was invented during this time. So this changes communication like crazy, right? So how people communicate, how people, now, the Bible can be printed and be passed around. And now the common man, right? Even though most people are illiterate, like now it's accessible. There's like something powerful about knowledge being accessible. And what does it look like for us? Because at Spike now we really try to be, a networking, right? This network of ideas, and then also a resourcing platform. So knowledge, like that place of like teaching and passing on knowledge, collaborating with other people so we can pass on this knowledge and learn from others. And then just the absurd creativity that came out of this time, meaning, some of the arts and just beautiful architecture, and just the things that came out of this time period are still impacting culture today. The way we build, the way we look at the world is very much impacted, by the people and the geniuses that kind of lived at this place. And another thing that I actually loved about reading about the Renaissance was that all these people were living at the same time. So all of them, all these great, musicians, all these great painters, all these great, architects, like they're all living at the same period, inspiring one another. So for me, I look at it as, how can we bring all these great minds together to ideate, right? To like pass on knowledge, and to create together, to be creative. And for me, I don't know what it looks like, right? For 2022 to have this kind of like, shift in thinking, and to have this like Renaissance ideation and knowledge being passed on, and just creativity, people breaking off the bounds of what is, and just kind of like exploring the impossible in a sense, or things we haven't even, in a sense expressed before. So, I look at it from the perspective of, we have NFTs now. We have the crypto world. We have, of course, like a world that's coming so fast at us, right? The metaverse, that if you're not ready, like you're left behind. And I think that God is going to raise up some creatives who are going to pave that path. Some things are being invented on, like some things that have never existed before are coming forth. And and I just like also love the idea that I find in like a lot of these spaces, when there's like war, plagues, or like just like a dark time in history. It seems like the Lord just raises creatives. At least creatives, just like always, like the ones who rise to the top. Like, so I look at the Great Depression in America. During that time, I mean, Disney, the Walt and his brother, like they came out of that, right? And it just became a hit. And you look at, for me, in like 2007, 2008, like that kind of like crash, economic crash. I mean, most of the things we're using right now kind of came in '09. That right after that crash, we see things like Instagram, things like Uber, things like WhatsApp. All of them are kind of coming out of this boom, things like Cash App, Venmo, all these things that are digital, payment systems, like things like the social media world. All these things are coming, and they start disrupting, right? They disrupting the banking industry. They're disrupting the way we do life and connect to each other. And so I know in the next few years, at least, I'm saying like next year, we're going to see a completely different shift, because we're looking at, technology like just ramping up like crazy. We're looking at different things like, cryptocurrency that's going to change how we do finances and like just interact with each other and make payments. We're looking at, the like fintech companies like changing how we interact with like banking systems. Of course, like AWS and Amazon Web Services and the things that they're doing, and Amazon, and um, just like the things they're doing with like even like automobiles and stuff, like, just making it possible for a car to drive itself. That's like so crazy to me. It seems like Minority Report, that movie Minority Report, where things just, everything is so digital. Everything is so digitalized, and we're going into that world. And so, I guess for me, it's like I see a new world coming forth that sometimes we're not really talking to, sometimes we're really slow to get into. But I believe that this year, 2022, we have to grab a hold of it. We have to lock in, we have to pray, we have to seek the Lord and say, Lord, I want Renaissance creativity. And for us at Spikenard, it looks like bringing people together. First things first, to write, because for me, one of the things that came to mind is that printing press. And I think when you have things on paper, to me, I look at, everything, the building I'm in right now, it came from a blueprint on a piece of paper. Like a song comes from a piece of paper, a movie comes from a piece of paper. Just like name them, right? They come from a piece of paper. It's all written down, right? And so for me, it looks like getting people to come together to write, like this. So we just did actually our first writing camp in Nairobi, and it was such a hit. We like produced 5 songs and brought different people, like 25 creatives that never really wrote before together, hadn't done this. But just like the beauty that comes together when we all come together and just are open minded and say, hey, let's create something new. And my prayer is that we keep bringing people together, not just for like writing for like songs, but writing even like films and doing different things like that that can just challenge the status quo, to see us really step into that area of creativity, and also bring people who can teach us, whether it's like NFTs, whether it's like in crypto, whether it's in the metaverse, because these things, they're coming fast. you know Understanding the digital world that we're jumping into is very, very critical for us to actually have real impact in culture, because these podcasts exist to prepare the creative leaders to enter into the new world and be, impact the culture, right? To impact the culture that you're, placed in. And so how can we help you if we're also not, in a sense, stepping into that Renaissance creativity? Because I believe like there's like a lot of people who are already ahead of us. So yeah, that's just like a few of my thoughts as we begin the year. The next few weeks, we'll be jumping a little bit into like fashion, having some of my friends like Abison and some of my friends like the Saladi brothers. And yeah, I'm super excited. If you have any topics that you want to hear from me, let me know. Just like you can drop a DM and we will get to you. So without further ado, thank you guys so much, and I will see you next week.